Hello, YouTube. So sorry, I forgot to push the button before I prayed. So you'll have to hear my prayer at the end, I guess. All right. um, okay. As some of you might know, I was away this week. I took a vacation from all my jobs. I get really excited when I get to do that because I don't do it very often. And so I went away for a few days and I invited my husband to come and he said no because you'll relax a lot better if I'm not there with you. And so so he didn't go with me, but he had a little vacation of his own as it turned out. He had switched shifts with somebody and so he had some time to just be himself too. So that was kind of cool. But one of the things that I did while I was away on my own is I studied the book of Habakkuk. Have any of you guys ever studied the book of Habakkuk? I don't know why. Well, I do. Before I went, I was looking for a good, deep Bible study to do. And so I found this study. It looked like it would be really good from Habakkuk. And so I was like, oh, that'll be a good thing for me to do while I'm away on my own for a few days. So I went to an Airbnb down in Greenville and I hung out down there. There was there's nothing exciting going on in Greenville. So it's just a quiet place to go and relax and, pray and study. And it was good. Anyway, on my way down there, I had this word, overwhelmed, just kind of in my head. And I don't know, I mean, I wasn't feeling that way really. I was glad to be getting away for a few days, but I hadn't been feeling overwhelmed or anything. But some people around me had been asking for a prayer and, they were having kind of an overwhelming time. And so this word was in my head. Then I studied Habakkuk. And it went right along with this word, overwhelmed. And so anyway, we'll get into that a little bit more later. I'm not doing my message from Habakkuk, but it is going to be part of it. So here's the definition of overwhelm. These are actually some synonyms, kind of. To bury or to drown. Like, when Pharaoh's armies were coming after Moses through the wilderness, they were overwhelmed by the waters when they crashed down over them, right? So that's that. To defeat completely. When Joshua went in and they took down the walls of Jericho, they overwhelmed the city, right? To give too much of a thing. I don't really have a biblical definition for this or a biblical example of this one necessarily, but I was overwhelmed with cards from all my friends and family for my 90th birthday, right? We might be overwhelmed with something like that. To have a strong emotional effect. And this is the one we most frequently use when we use it in normal conversation, right? I'm overwhelmed with life. I'm overwhelmed with challenges. Sometimes we're overwhelmed with joy, right? Like when you hold the first little grandbaby for the first time and you're like, oh, look at that baby, it's so precious, right? And we just get overwhelmed with emotion. And so that's what this one is. This microphone is still a little bit too loud, I think. I need to turn it down a little bit. When I breathe out and it echoes in my brain, I figure it's too loud. All right. All right. So, overwhelm, when there is too much or too many of something, right? We have too many troubles or too many whatever. So we're going to talk about overwhelming moments. And like I said, we talked about the new baby or, I remember this one time when I was a kid. My mother watches this. She's going to be like, stop telling people these things. One time when I was a kid, my mom, I might have told you this before. My mom was I was down in the basement playing. We had a little playroom downstairs and she lived in a split foyer house. And I was coming up the stairs and my mom was coming down the hall and I saw her walking and she got about the middle of the hallway and she stopped in the middle of the hallway and she clenched her fist. She let out this really loud scream. And then it was just like, everything in her. And then she just went and finished on down the hallway. It made an impression. I was like 6, I was like, I don't know what is going on in mom's life, but she is having a moment. As an adult, I've had a few of those where I'm just like, what else are you going to do? And so you get a little bit overwhelmed by things sometimes. And sometimes we can get overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed with the things around us. We're all created in God's image. And because we are created in God's image, we know that all of our emotions are part of that. And so when we have these overwhelming feelings of joy or frustration or whatever it is that we're having, our feelings and our emotions are part of who we are as a created being in God's image. And so he understands them, is what I'm saying. He knows that they're there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Our emotions are what makes us human. What happens when they're too much? What do we do when our emotions overwhelm us, right? Sometimes we get angry or frustrated, and we do like my mom and just scream in the middle of the hallway. Sometimes we just sit down and cry, right? I remember a few times when life would get really overwhelming and the bills were stacking up. And this one time, I had my first son. He was a newborn. He's in his little crib. I'm living in this little 3-room apartment, and the wind is like, when the wind blows, it comes through the windows, because it was, I paid $195 a month for this apartment, okay? Just that'll give you an idea. So the wind is blowing through the curtains, I'm not currently working because I have this new baby at home, and I watch them come and shut my water off. And I'm standing there looking out the window, and I'm like, well, nothing I can do about that. There's this thing where you try to tie all the ends together, and once they're falling apart, you just go, okay, well, that's that, and you move on. I found it to be kind of a relief. There was nothing I could do to try and tie it together anymore. It was already done. Now I could just move on and dust off, and But often when we are overwhelmed, it will lead us to Jesus, right? Being overwhelmed leads us to a place of gratitude, or it leads us to a place of seeking and praying and asking him for help. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I picked this verse in Luke 7:37 and 38. And I will tell you that I'm going to read it to you. Then I'm going to go through a bunch of things that are not about this, and then we're going to get back to this at the end. On Tuesdays, I usually know what I'm going to talk about. But for the bulletin, they need to know what verse. And I don't always know that until I'm done with a lot of things. So it ties in, but All right. So we talked about this a few weeks ago also. And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner stood at Jesus' feet and behind him weeping. And she began to wash his feet with her tears and wipe them with the hair of her head. And she kissed his feet and anointed them with fragrant oil. And if you will remember, what had happened was that one of the Pharisees had invited Jesus to dinner. And when the people heard that Jesus was going to be there, they came. And so this woman, who is described only as a sinner, came to see Jesus, and she brought this very expensive fragrant oil, and she knelt at his feet, and she wept, and she anointed his feet, and she wiped his feet with her hair. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, so I won't go into that too much, but the idea there is she was so overwhelmed in his presence that this is how she responded, right? She knelt before him at his feet. All of her sin and all of her shame and all of her guilt was washed away in that moment because she got to be in his presence. And she wanted nothing more than she weeping over him and, wiping his feet with her hair. This is the kind of thing that I want us to think about when we're thinking about these overwhelming emotions. So we're going to start there. Here's our 3 points. Overwhelming doubt. Have you guys ever experienced overwhelming doubt? God, I know what you said, but I'm really having a hard time holding on to it right now. I think every one of us has probably been there at some point. Overwhelming grief. Certainly we have been here. When there is something that hurts us so deeply, we don't feel like we're ever going to get past it. The grief is just heavy. It's overwhelming us. It pushes us down, right? And so sometimes we're dealing with overwhelming grief. And sometimes we have overwhelming joy. And so we're going to talk about these 3 things. We're going to begin with Habakkuk. All right, I am not going to go into the whole thing of let me show you. I don't know if you'll be able to see this very well. This is my highlights and notes from the first 3 days of this week. So I have been all over in this book, and I am not going to go into all of this, but there's some really cool stuff in there, and if you've never studied it, you totally should. Because Habakkuk is a lot like a lot of us. The first thing that he says is, "Oh Lord, how long shall I cry?" Right there, we know that Habakkuk is overwhelmed with something. How long do I have to wait? Any of you guys ever asked God that? He asks him a couple of other things too. So he is overwhelmed with sadness and frustration and disillusionment. And here's why. I'm not going to go into too much, but I'm going to give you a quick background. So Habakkuk, this book was written right before the Babylonian exile, okay? So what's gone on is the nation has already been split into northern and southern. And all of the surrounding nations, all the surrounding people are attacking, and the false gods are being worshipped, and everything is going crazy. And Habakkuk, instead of this being where God goes to the prophet and says, "Hey, I want you to go and tell the people this," Habakkuk goes to God. And he says, "Don't you see what's happening to your people? How long do we have to endure like this?" Right? Everything is crazy around us. These people, they're just getting away with all kinds of stuff they shouldn't be getting away with. Don't you see what's happening here? I mean, that's really what the first few verses are. This is what it says. The burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. And then it says his question, "O Lord, how long shall I cry and you will not hear? How long will I cry out and you're not answering me?" How long have we cried out and we feel like God is just not paying any attention? Even cry out to you, violence, it says in exclamations. And I'll tell you that the note on this is, that I'm saying there's cruelty and injustice. Don't you see it? And you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? For plundering and violence are before me. There is strife and contention arises. Therefore, the law is powerless and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore, perverse judgment proceeds. Everything around me is crazy. You know that I see it. I know that you're God, and I know that you have it in your power to do something about it. Why are you making me go through this? Why do I have to look at this every day and you don't do anything about it? He was overwhelmed with everything that he saw. And he did what a lot of us do when we're in that situation. He went, "God, where are you? When are you going to do something about this?" Right? Now, when we get into this, and like I said, I should probably do a whole message about Habakkuk because it's really awesome. But what happens is God gives him a response. Only God's response is not what Habakkuk expected it to be. Because what God tells him is, "Oh, I see it. I know exactly what's going on, and I've already put plans in motion. I know what's going to happen next. Wait and see. Watch. This is what's going to happen." So God's response is, "Keep watching. I'm sending someone," the Chaldeans, right? "It won't be what you expected. You think everything's going to be all right, and I'm telling you they're coming to take you all down. And here's why. It's exactly what I promised." Now, if you want to look in the book of Habakkuk, it's 3 little chapters. That's a little tiny book. And I'm just going to tell you, there's this little passage here, and I just want to share this with you because this is just kind of, this was awesome. So after God tells him, "Look, I'm sending these people. They're fierce. They're wild. They're going to come. They're going to take you down. You don't stand a chance against them. Just know that." Right? That's what he says. You can't do anything about it. This is what's going to happen. And he tells them how fierce and terrible they are. And then the prophet says, are you not from everlasting? Have you not been here forever? You are my God, my Holy One. We can't die. You promised to prosper us. What's going to happen next, right? He goes through and he reminds God of who God is and his character and what he knows about him. And then God says this in chapter 2. He says, write the vision on tablets that he may run who reads it. So I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I want you to write it down so that whoever sees it will know it's time to get out, because they're coming in, right? So that whoever runs will see it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak. And I'll tell you that in my studies, one of the things that I learned is that this word speak in this verse has the idea of, like in the beginning when God spoke life into the earth. This truth will speak. This is God's promise, and it has breath. It's going to have life because God spoke it. And it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. Right? It will not tarry. God says, this is my word that I promised. And it's referring to when God said, if you keep my commandments and you love me and you follow me, all the way back in Deuteronomy, then you will be blessed. And if you don't, and if you continue to worship idols and you continue to do all these bad things, then there will be a curse on you. God promised it, and he's telling Habakkuk, you already know what I said, and my words are true, even if you don't like them, right? So he's telling Habakkuk, I am exactly who you say I am. And because of that, wait and see. There is something coming. It's not going to look like what you hoped it will look like. But in the end, it will have a good result, right? So that's what happens here. It's exactly what God has promised. This was an unexpected intervention, right? Have you ever had any kind of unexpected intervention? Something that comes and messes up the system, and you think, oh, this is terrible. Here's a great example. After 9/11, there were many stories that came out of people who were supposed to be on a plane, and something happened. They were having a horrible morning that morning until they realized they had missed a plane that went down, right? Sometimes we have these things that we think are the worst thing ever, and really what it did was it intervened. It put us in a place where we needed to be because God had a different plan. We get irritated and agitated. That's what Habakkuk did, right? He's looking around at it and he's going, what is going on here? Where are you, God? What are you doing? Why aren't you doing something about this? And God says, I am. Just wait. A lot of times we have to get ourselves in that position too. Habakkuk thought that God was taking too long, and it led him to cry out. And that's the thing about when we are so overwhelmed with our doubts about who God is and what he's doing and how he's going to get us through it. If we know, especially if we know, have an inkling of who he is or who we think he should be, it brings us to him. We're on our knees and we're crying out and we're saying, God, where are you and why aren't you moving in this thing? Really, that's the place he wanted us to be in the first place, right? We shouldn't have to fall to our knees. We should already be started there. We should be starting every day with, God, do what you need to do in my life. Show me what I need to be doing, right? So that's the thing. When things cause us to doubt, when they cause us to feel these overwhelming feelings like everything is out of control, 99% of the time, that will bring us straight to the feet of the cross. That's where we need to be. And the other thing that Habakkuk taught us here is that God said to Habakkuk is, my words are true. If I spoke them, they have life. Trust them. It's true. God's delay leads us to prayer. We're going to talk about overwhelming grief. For this one, we're going to be in the book of John. And this is when Lazarus has died. In this particular instance, we can see grief in a few different people in a few different ways, right? We can see Mary and Martha, of course, they're grieving because their brother has died. Jesus is grieving, and we're going to talk about several reasons why Jesus was grieving. Jesus was grieving here. All the Jewish people that were surrounding Mary and Martha, they were all grieving because Lazarus was dead. So, all these people have this overwhelming grief. And so when Jesus is coming into town, he sees Martha. And in chapter 11, verse 20, it says, "Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you.'" So this is the first thing, right? If you had come, this wouldn't have happened. But now that you're here, I know that you can handle it. Right? Have we ever said anything like that in our lives? Oh man, I have definitely said things like that. God, where were you when that thing went wrong? Please fix it now. Right? He was probably right there. I was probably doing something stupid that caused it to go wrong in the first place. That happens a lot. All right. Whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day," right? I know that will happen. I know that this death here is not forever, right? We all have that. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? Right? Do you understand this? She's just told him this. She gets that, right? But now he says, "Do you believe this?" And she said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world." So she has established that she believes he could have prevented it, and now that he's here, he's going to fix it, that he is the Son of God, and he can do this because it's within his authority and his power. All right, so then Jesus goes, and after they've had this conversation, she goes to get Mary. Martha goes to get Mary, and she says, "Jesus wants to talk to you." And so Mary comes out, and all the Jewish people come out, all the Jewish leaders that are there with them, they come out too. And she says, she tells Mary, she says, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." And so she came out quickly. And then in verse 32, it says, "Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.'" So she says the same thing that Martha said. "Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled." All right. You're going to see, and then, hold on just a second. So then he says and he said, "Where have you laid him?" And he says, they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And in verse 35, it says, Jesus wept, right? Mary and Martha's weeping was not the same weeping as Jesus. When Mary and Martha were weeping, this is wailing, right? This is clothes-tearing, overwhelming grief, all right? In the original, that word for weeping is different than when Jesus wept. When Jesus wept, it's quiet tears. It's not overwhelmed grief tears, okay? I think that's important to note. This is one of those instances when some of these words, scholars disagree. However, so then it says, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. He groaned. He was angry. He was grumbling, right? Jesus groaned at them because they're all weeping and tearing at their clothes. And so, even though they've said they believe that he can raise Lazarus, they're so distraught and so overwhelmed with grief. So he groaned. And then we're going to go down just a little bit further. Verse 36, it says, "Then the Jews said, 'See how he loved him?'" Look, he's crying because he loved him so much. And then in 38, it says, "Then Jesus, again, groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, 'Take away the stone.' Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, 'Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days.'" All right, we're going to pause there. Jesus talked to Martha, and he said, "Your brother will rise. Do you believe?" She said, "Yes, absolutely, I believe." Jesus talks to Mary. She falls at his feet. She says, "If you had come, he wouldn't have died. What are you going to do about it?" Jesus wept these little tears and groaned and grumbled at them for making this big giant display. And here's what happens. When he says, "Take away the stone," and Martha says, "But by this time there'll be a terrible stench." Now, she's already said she believes that he can raise him from the dead. She said she believes that all that stuff that he said is true, that she believes he's the Son of God and he has the power and he has the authority. But now she's like, do we really want to do that? Is that a good idea? Right? I demonstrate this with the youth groups sometimes this way. We will take something to God, right? We will give it to him. God, I don't know what to do with this situation. I'm just going to give it to you. I'm going to put it in your hands and I'm going to trust you with it. And then we walk away and somebody says, "Hey, how's that thing going?" And we say, "Oh, let me tell you." And we take it back and we start telling them how terrible it is and how, "Oh, you're just not going to believe what I've been going through. It's the most horrible thing ever," right? Instead of leaving it with God and saying, "You know what? I don't know, but God's got that." Right? It's a little bit rough at the moment, but God's got that. What kind of witness is that, right? I mean, that would be a huge testimony to be like, "I don't know, but God's got that." And then when it works out, they're going to be like, "I don't know, but she said God had it, and he had it." Martha does the same thing. "I don't know if we should open that tomb, Jesus. He's been in there a few days. This is not good." Right? All right. Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Didn't we just talk about this? She says, "Oh, yeah." Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And then he says, "Lazarus, come forth." Right? So Jesus is standing at the tomb, and the first thing he does is, for the benefit of the people around him, "Father, thank you for answering this prayer. I know that you've heard me." Right? And that's how we're supposed to be. That we're supposed to know that we took it to God and we gave it to him, we asked him for help with it, and he's there. He's got it. It's not a problem, right? Yeah. So here's where he is. We have to trust God when it's hard. It doesn't get much harder than, my brother is dead and he's been dead for a few days, but Jesus can raise him. We have to trust God when it's hard. Things that are impossible for us are not impossible for him. That's why we take them to him. That's why we need him. Because he can do the impossible things that we can't do on our own. Ever since the beginning of time, that's the lesson that he's been trying to teach his people. Trust me. I've got you. I know this seems weird, but trust me. I'm going to part the waters. I'm going to send manna to feed you every single day. I'm going to take care of your needs today the same as I took care of them yesterday. Trust me. And he keeps saying it over and over and over again. It gets like Habakkuk, and Habakkuk is like, I don't know why they're not trusting you. What are you going to do about it? Right? He says, listen, I'm telling you what I'm going to do about it. Jesus is weeping, anger, and grumbling and doubt is because even though they've said, yes, we believe, they are still weeping and tearing at their clothes, right? Jesus' timing is good and his words are faithful. God's timing is always good and his words are always faithful. He is going to care for you. He is going to take care of you if you trust him with everything. That's the deal here. All right, overwhelming joy. And I won't have to spend a whole lot of time on this one. In 2 Samuel chapter 6, we read about David bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. And the first thing that happens is the Ark of the Covenant had rules about how it was supposed to be transported. So there were these rings on either side of it, and you had to put these big poles through the rings, and you couldn't touch the ark, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. You had to go 6 steps and make a sacrifice. It was a lot of rules, all right? And so David, as he's bringing the ark in, he didn't follow all the rules that were supposed to be followed for moving the ark. And Uzzah and, I forgot the other one's name. What was Robin probably knows it. She's probably back there going, oh, come on, you know his name. All right. Let's see. I don't know why I didn't write it on here, because Uzzah died. That's why I put him in there and didn't put the other one in. Or maybe I just didn't see it in this. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Abinadab. He knew what the rules were. He knew what was supposed to be done, and he was there, and he didn't make sure that they were doing it. And so he kind of, had a little responsibility for what happened to Uzzah, because what happened is they put the ark on a cart, a new cart, it says, because they were, taking good care of it. And they went to move it, and they hit a bump, and it started to tip, and Uzzah reached out to grab it so it wouldn't fall, and immediately he died. Right? Because there were rules that God had put in place. So David then became overwhelmed with fear because, if you touch the thing, you can die instantly. That's kind of dangerous. So they put it over at Obed-Edom. I think that's the name. Anyway, they put it over at his house and they left it there for 3 months. They were like, yeah, we'll check on that thing later, right? Let's see what happens to it while we leave it there. Well, over the course of a few months, his house was thoroughly blessed because it was there. And so then David was like, okay, maybe it's safe. And so they went and got it to bring it back, right? And this time they followed all the rules. And when they were following all the rules, this is what it says. Now the ark of the Lord came into the city of David. As the ark of the Lord came into the city of David. David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. As they came in, they went their 6 paces, they made their sacrifices, there were people playing cymbals, and if you read it in 1 Chronicles also, you'll get the whole picture. This was a big street party when they brought this thing in, right? And so they were honoring it this way. It says, now when the ark came in, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and she saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. And so they brought the ark of the Lord in, and they set it in its place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had erected for it. And then they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. Later, she says to him, what kind of king are you, looking all shameful, dancing around like you've got no dignity? Right? That's basically what she says to him. And he said to her, so David said to Michal, It was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father and all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore, I will play music before the Lord, and I will be even more undignified than this, and will be humble in my own sight. But as for the maidservants of whom you have spoken, because she said, all the maidservants are going to see you acting undignified, he said, I will be held in honor. He says, I didn't do this for you or anybody else. I did it for the Lord. And for him, I will be as undignified as I need to be. Right? This was a big deal. So he was overwhelmed with joy. The people celebrated. David danced. They made sacrifices. There's David dancing. All right. The thing is, if you read through the Psalms, you are going to see David's overwhelming guilt. You're going to see David's overwhelming joy. You're going to see sometimes where David has overwhelming pride. You're going to see a lot if you study King David, right? But in this instance, his fear was overtaken by his joy. He was initially afraid of what would happen, and when he realized that God was going to be God and continue to do what he needed to do, then he danced, not just for the people, but for the goodness of God. Worship is not always dignified. Sometimes we dance, sometimes we cry out, sometimes we weep. There's lots of ways that God's people get overwhelmed. We have God's nature in us, and so our emotions go crazy, right? Sometimes not in great ways. Sometimes we forget to trust God in the moments. God wants to overwhelm us with his presence. So when we're overwhelmed with fear or anger or frustration or disillusionment, like Habakkuk was, we can go to God and say, God, I don't understand this. Will you help me? Right? I can't do this. Will you help me? And he absolutely will. We are called to trust God in the face of doubt. We are called to rejoice in the face of grief. And we are called to dance in the face of fear. God wants to overwhelm you with who he is. He wants to breathe his words, living words, into you every single day. And the best way you can do that is to just let him overwhelm you. Just be in his presence. Let him speak to you, right? Just like the sinner at Jesus' feet. She had so much to lay bare there. She just wept in his presence. God, I do not deserve to be in your presence. I do not deserve to be in a place where I get to serve you every single day. But I thank you so much that you give me the opportunity, that you let me come to a job where it is my job to be in your presence. I thank you so much that you love me, that you see the needs of every single person that's here and all those that will hear this. God, I thank you that you know us from the inside out and that you love us in spite of all of our flaws and all of our weaknesses. God, I ask as we go through this week that you would continue to pull us nearer to you, that you would overwhelm us with your presence and your love. I ask that every single person who heard this message will open their hearts and allow you in to overwhelm them. God, I know that you have so much that you want to give us. And so we just want to take our time to be in your presence, to commune with you. And God, we just ask that you would draw us closer to you, lead us, be with us this week, and give us a new revelation of who you are every single day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. If you would like to stand, we're going to turn to 638. And we're going to sing verses 1, 2, and 3. And YouTube, I have to let you go because of copyrights. If you like and subscribe this, I can live stream, and then I don't have to do that anymore. All right. Be blessed.